Hello everyone, welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah here. We're holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Vav. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Sukkah. Meir Hashem, today we will be learning Daf Pei Vav Amid Beis, but we pick up today on Pei Vav Amid Aleph in the second to last line, Siman Tuf Reish Chaf Vav. We're up to the words of the Ramah in Sif Gimel. We actually touched upon this Ramah already, but I feel that I did not do it justice, and therefore I want to go through this Ramah a second time. So, before we go to the words of the Ramah in Sif Gimel, we have to go back to the Ramah in Sif Beis. We've been speaking about the halacha of Ta'ase HaAsui, and as we explained previously, the pasuk says Chag HaSukkos Ta'ase Loch, and we learned from there that you have to make a sukkah. What does that mean? It means that when you build a sukkah and you take that schach and you put it on top of the sukkah, that schach has to be made bekashrus. You have to put down that schach in such a way that that schach is kosher schach and you have a kosher sukkah. You can't erect the sukkah and erect the schach in a way in which the schach is psul and then do something external to the schach in order to render it kosher. That's the psul of Ta'ase v'lo min ha'asui. So, for example, we had a case. Let's say that you built a sukkah, and you built a sukkah under a tree. And now you went ahead, the sukkah is under a tree, the schach is not schach kosher, you don't have a kosher sukkah, it's under a tree. Now you went ahead and you detached the tree from the ground. We said that's not enough to take away the problem of Ta'ase v'lo min ha'asui. What you have to do is, you have to cut down the tree. I'm talking about a case where you're actually using the branches of the tree as a schach. So you built the sukkah, you took the branches of the tree, you put it over the sukkah. That's not kosher schach. Now you take a chainsaw and you detach the tree from the ground. That is not a way to make the sukkah kosher, because when you put the schach on top of the sukkah, it wasn't kosher schach. Now you went ahead and you cut the tree from the ground to render the schach kosher. But that's Ta'ase v'lo min ha'asui. That's, you didn't put up the schach bekashrus, you put up the schach was psul. Now you did something to try and render it kosher. That's a problem of Ta'ase v'lo min ha'asui. In that case, in order to take away from the problem of Ta'ase v'lo min ha'asui, what you would have to do is you would have to pick up each branch, you'd have to pick it up and put it down l'shem tzeil, and that would go ahead and make the sukkah kosher. So that's the psul of Ta'ase v'lo min ha'asui. In Sif Beis, the Ramah said an interesting case. The Ramah said a chiddush. He said, what happens if you build a sukkah inside a house? So the case that I gave then was, imagine somebody has a very tall garage. So he goes ahead and he builds a sukkah inside his garage. So you have a garage inside the sukkah, inside the garage, you have a perfect sukkah. Beautiful walls, beautiful schach, everything. But it's psul because it's a sukkah b'sayich habayis. A sukkah b'sayich habayis is psul. Now you take off the roof. Is that a problem of Ta'ase v'lo min ha'asui? So in Sif Beis, the Ramah said no. The Ramah said that's okay. That's not Ta'ase v'lo min ha'asui. And the way we explained the Ramah then, we said that the chiddush of the Ramah is, over there in that case, you have a beautiful sukkah and you have beautiful schach. And you put down that schach on top of that sukkah l'shem tzeil. It happens to be that the sukkah is psul because it's a sukkah b'sayich habayis. Now you go ahead and you rip off the roof of the garage and you expose this beautiful sukkah to the open sky. The Ramah says now you have a kosher sukkah. It's not Ta'ase v'lo min ha'asui, and the Ramah explains why. Because over there the psul was not intrinsic to the schach. It's not pshat that when you put up the sukkah, you put psul schach on top of the sukkah. No, that schach was 100% kosher schach. There was a problem external to the sukkah, which is that there was a roof positioned over it. Okay, that's not a problem of Ta'ase v'lo min ha'asui. If you remove the roof, you took away the external problem, and now the sukkah is a kosher sukkah. That's what the Ramah says in Sif Beis. And again, let's contrast that to the previous case. In the previous case, you took the branches of a tree that were mechuber l'karka, and you put those branches of the tree on top of the sukkah for schach. Over there, the psul is intrinsic to the schach. That schach is schach psul. It's mechuber l'karka. You want to render it kosher by cutting the tree off the ground. That's Ta'ase v'lo min ha'asui. But over here, the psul is not intrinsic to the schach. The schach that you put on top of the sukkah while the sukkah was in the garage is perfectly kosher as chach. It's a perfectly kosher as sukkah. The problem is it's not exposed to the sky. You remove the roof, you expose it to the sky, you have a kosher as sukkah, and that's not a problem of tasa v'loy min ha'asui. That's Siv Beis. Now let's go over here to the Ramah in Siv Gimel. 2 lines off the bottom. Says the Ramah, Hagah. V'chein, similarly, mutter lasois ha'sukkah takas hagagois ha'asuyos liftoyach v'liskar. Let's say you have a sukkah, and your sukkah is equipped with a roof that opens and closes. So now, we're not talking about a sukkah that's positioned inside a building that's external to it. We're talking about a sukkah which is its own structure, and it has a roof that opens and closes. Okay, so says the Ramah, V'chein mutter lases ha'sukkah tachas hagagois ha'asuyos liftayach v'liskar. You could go ahead and you could put the schach up underneath this roof, which is made to open and close. Says the Mishnah Berurah, very interestingly, in Sif Yud Ches, tachas hagagois ha'asuyos ritzoyno loymar. What the Ramah means to tell you over here is, afilu ba'oid shehein siguros. You could put the schach on top of this sukkah even while its roof is closed. So you go out to this shed, and this shed has a roof that's made to open and close. You go and you put your schach on top of the sukkah while the roof is closed, and then you open up the roof. And the Ramah is telling you a chiddush over here, continues the Chavetz Chaim, v'loy mikri tase v'loy min ha'asui kanal b'sif beis b'hagah. Chavetz Chaim tells me here that this Ramah over here in Siv Gimel is an extension of the Ramah in Siv Beis. The same way in Siv Beis, the Ramah said you could build a sukkah inside the garage, and then you could remove the roof of the garage, and it's not a problem of tasa v'loy min ha'asui. And the reason we explained is because the Ramah holds that over there the psul is external to the schach. So too over here, if you have a sukkah that's equipped with an opening and closed roof, and the roof happens to be closed when you put up the schach, no problem. Again, the schach is kosher as schach. So, the roof is closed, who cares? When you open up the roof, there's no problem of tasa v'loy min ha'asui, because you're removing a problem that's external to the schach. So learns the Ramah. That's the sheet of the Ramah. However, continues the Chavetz Chaim, V'da, but you should know, the das habach lahachmir bozeh. The Bach takes issue with this Ramah, and the Bach is machmir in this case, and he holds shetzarek liftayach talseis hagag koydem shemesachich. In this case, where this sukkah is equipped with a roof that opens and closes, the Bach says you must open up the roof before you put the schach on. So first we have the Bach that disagrees with the Ramah. V'chein hiskim ha'magen Avram. The Magen Avram agrees with the Bach. He also disagrees with this Ramah. Ve'eliyah Rabbah u'sha'ar achronim. So you have the Bach, the Magen Avram, the Eliyah Rabbah, and other achronim who all take issue with this Ramah. And so far they go as to say, Ve'im shachach v'iniach aschach ba'oid shayu hagagoy segurim, and they hold, if you were to put the schach on top of this sukkah while the roof was in the closed position, tzarich liftayach hagagois ulananea kol haschach, you would have to open the roof and you would have to lift up each piece of schach. Continues the Chavetz Chaim. Tahainu, what do I mean that you have to be minanea all the schach? Tahainu sheyagbia kol eitz lavadoi, you have to lift up each individual piece of schach. V'yachzor v'yanichenu l'shem tzeil, and put it down l'shem tzeil. V'shuv yagbia eitz chaveroi v'yanichoi v'chein kulam. According to these, the Bach, the Magen Avram, the Eliyah Rabbah, other achronim who disagree with this Ramah, b'di'evet even, you put the schach on top of this structure while the roof was in the closed position, you need to open the roof, you need to move every single individual piece of schach, you have to lift it up and put it down l'shem tzeil. So all of these achronim disagree with the Ramah. Now they agree with the Ramah in Sif Beis, but they disagree with the Ramah in Sif Gimel. So what we have to understand is, what's the nafkamina between Sif Beis and Sif Gimel? Now, I think that there's a difference here between the Bach and the Magen Avram. In reading through the Bach is a little difficult to understand. To me, his phraseology is a bit vague. But what I read in the Bach is as follows. In the first case, in Sif Beis, what did you do? You built a sukkah inside the garage. Now, let's say the sukkah is 8 feet tall, and let's say the garage is 12 feet tall. Somebody comes into the garage and he looks at the sukkah and he says, wow, that's a beautiful sukkah. Wow, very nice walls, fiberglass, tongue and groove. Very, very nice. How does the door work? Wow, it has a window. What did you use for schach? Wow, that's very nice schach. I like that schach. It's very muhuder and it looks very pretty and everything else. If you would ask this person, what is the roof of the sukkah? There's no question he would tell you that the roof of the sukkah is the schach. That's the roof of this sukkah. Now, it happens to be that this sukkah is psul. Why is this sukkah psul? This sukkah is psul because, unfortunately, while it happens to have beautiful schach, it is a sukkah b'say chabayis. It's a sukkah that's positioned under another roof, and since it's a sukkah that's positioned under a second roof, it's a psul sukkah. But again, what is the roof of the sukkah? There is no question that the roof of the sukkah is the schach. Therefore, the psul of the roof of the garage is completely external to the sukkah. When you remove the roof of the garage, like the Ramah said in Siv Beis, there's no problem of tasa v'lo min asli. Contrast that to the case here in Siv Gimel. In Siv Gimel, this sukkah is equipped with a roof that opens and closes. It's not an external roof. It's not the roof of the garage. You have a shed that has a roof that opens and closes. Somebody comes to this shed and you ask him, what's the roof of this shed? The roof of the shed is the roof that opens and closes. Now, if you go ahead and you put up schach while the roof is in the closed position, the words of the Bach are, it's not nireis kesukkah at all. It's not nireis kegaga sukkah. That schach does not even appear to be the roof of this structure. The roof of this structure is the roof that opens and closes. Now, if you open it, so when it's in the open position, there's no question that if you put down schach and you put it down l'shem tzel, you erected a roof for the structure now, right? Because there is no roof there, right? Now it's open, it's in the open position. So you put on schach and you put it on l'shem tzel, that's 100% kosher. But if you put it on while the roof is in the closed position, it doesn't even have a shem sukkah. It doesn't even look like that roof that you put up while the roof was in the closed position is a roof. That's not the roof of this structure. The roof of the structure is already there. It's the roof that opens and closes and it's in the closed position. That seems to be why the Bach is chelik and Ramah in this case. Now the Magen Avram uses very different phraseology. The Magen Avram seems to say that the chiluk over here is a different chiluk totally. Now there's a big kasha to me on the Magen Avram. I don't know how the Magen Avram is going to explain the words of the Ramah in Siv Beis. But I'll tell you what the Magen Avram seems to say. The Magen Avram seems to say that the major difference between Siv Beis and Siv Gimel, in both cases, says the Magen Avram, there is a problem of tasa v'lo min ha'asui. Even in Siv Beis, the Magen Avram says, if you build the sukkah in the garage, there is a problem of tasa v'lo min ha'asui. But what takes away the problem of tasa v'lo min ha'asui in Siv Beis? He says, when you do demolition to the roof of the garage, that is such a significant act, ripping the roof of the structure off in order to make the sukkah below kosher. And you're doing that l'shem tzel. What does that mean, you're doing it l'shem tzel? I'm ripping the roof of the garage off so as to expose the schach of the sukkah below to the open sky, and the schach is there l'shem tzel. Says the Magen Avram, that takes away the problem of tasa v'lo min ha'asui in Siv Beis. That act of demolition is an act of tasa. That is mekayim chag hasukah is tasa loch. But in Siv Gimel, when you have a roof that's made to open and close, says the Magen Avram, you can't tell me that opening up the roof is a significant enough act to take away the problem of tasa v'lo min ha'asui and to fulfill chag hasukah is tasa loch. Okay. So I felt that previously I didn't do enough of a good enough job explaining the difference over here between Siv Beis and Siv Gimel and the chiluk between the Ramah and the Bach of the Magen Avram. I hope now I made it very clear. Okay, now let's go weiter in the Chavetz Chaim over here. Nice cut in Yud Ches. 2 lines, in my Mishnah, it's 2 lines off the bottom, in the middle of the line, right by the Ois Kat L'Chav Ches for the Sharet Tzion. where the Chofetz Chaim brings down another interesting case. V'imsichech al hatikra. Let's say you have a very interesting situation. You have a shed, and the shed has a roof. Now you want to turn the shed into a sukkah. So what you do is, you take schach, and you put schach on top of the roof. So let's imagine you have a shed with a flat roof, and now you take bamboo poles, and you put bamboo poles on top of the flat roof. Now you go inside the sukkah, and you rip down the roof of the sukkah, and now you expose the schach to the sukkah. How about that? How does that fit into this discussion? So says the Chofetz Chaim, V'emsichech ala tikra, if you put schach down above the ceiling, above the roof, v'achakach cheser atikra, and then you go ahead and you remove that ceiling, pasol lekule alma. Everybody would agree, both the Ramah, even the Ramah, who is more makel in this case, and the Machmirim, they would all agree that this is a problem of tasa v'lo min ha'asui, mipnei shelo haya shem sukkah ala schach shal hatikra mitchila kevet shelo hayu kan defanois. Over here, says the Chofetz Chaim, over here this is a very different case. In the cases that we learned earlier, in both cases, in the case of Sif Beis and in the case of Sif Gimel, you put schach on a sukkah, and the schach was sheltering over an open place. It was sheltering over a sukkah. You had a sukkah with 4 walls, and you had schach on top sheltering over the interior of that sukkah. The problem is that the sukkah is psul. The problem is the sukkah is psul because there's a roof above it. So okay, we could do something to remedy the situation. In the garage, we could remove the roof. In the case of the one that opens and closes, according to the Bach and the Magen Avram, you don't have a remedy. According to the Ramah, you do have a remedy. But here, in this case, there's no remedy at all, because over here, when you put the schach up, the schach was not sheltering over an empty space. The schach was laying flat on top of a roof with no space underneath it. In the words of the Chofetz Chaim, Kevin shelo yahayu kan defanois. There's no walls. What does that mean, there's no walls? In order to have an oil, in order to have a schach, in order to have something considered l'shem tzeil, it has to be sheltering over an enclosed space. Over here, there is no space whatsoever. The schach is laying mamish on top of the flat roof. There's no empty space beneath it. So what do you want to remedy? You want to go ahead and you want to rip down the ceiling. So now, not only do you want that by ripping down the ceiling, suddenly the schach should become l'shem tzeil, you want more than that. You want to first give it a shem sukkah. It was never a sukkah. It was never sheltering over anything. In that case, says the Chofetz Chaim, even the Ramah would agree that there's a problem of tasa v'lo min ha'asui over here, because over here there was no shem sukkah at all. In the words of the Chofetz Chaim, v'lachei lo mahani asaras hatikra lahakshar sukkah. That vite we can't go. We can't go so far as to say that ripping down the ceiling underneath it, where you're first creating a sheltered space under the schach, you can't say that there's a way to remedy that situation. That's definitely a problem of tasa v'lo min ha'asui. Now let's go weiter in the Ramah. So the Ramah said over here, "V'chein mutar lases hasukah takas hagagos asuyim liftayach v'liskar." You could go ahead and you could put up the schach under a roof that's made to open and close. Umutar lisagran mipnei hagishamim. And now on Yom Tov, you could go ahead and you could close this roof to shelter the sukkah from the rain. V'lachzar ulepaschan, and then you could go ahead and you could reopen it. Okay, let's stop here for a moment. Now, in this discussion, we're going to have to discuss 2 potential problems. One potential problem is, again, a tasa v'lo min ha'asui problem. So it's very nice. Let's say, according to the Ramah, you put up the schach while the roof was closed, and then you opened up the roof. Okay, says the Ramah, no problem. That's not tasa v'lo min ha'asui. Okay, now on Yom Tov you're going to go and you're going to close the roof. When you close the roof, you effectively pasel the sukkah. Now you're going to go ahead and you're going to open the roof again. Okay, according to the sheet of the Ramah, it's very easy to understand why this is okay. The Ramah holds there's never a problem of tasa v'lo min ha'asui, even if you put the schach on while the roof was closed. So if you passel the sukkah by closing it again, and then you open it up again, weiter, there's no problem of tasa v'lo min ha'asui. But how about according to the Bach and the Magen Avram? Would the Bach and the Magen Avram agree to this? So let's see the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah starts on Pei Vav Amud Aleph. The bottom line is cutting your test. The lachzar ulapaschan. You could go ahead after you close this shlak, after you close this roof, you could open it up again. Says the Chavetz Chaim on Pei Vav Amud Beis, V'zeh muter afilu l'das hamachmirin hanal. This would be muter even according to the Bach and even according to the Magen Avram. Why? Kevon shenase mitchila behechsher. Since the sukkah was originally made when it was kosher, when you put the schach down in an oifen where it was kosher. According to the Bach and the Magen Avram, you had to open up the roof and you had to put down the schach. When you did that, you were mekayim the pasuk of Chag HaSukkos Tase. You went ahead and you made a sukkah bekashrus. Dahainu shapasuk hagag kodesh shesichech. Even though when you now go ahead and close the roof, you're going to passel the sukkah, and now when you open the roof again, you want to render it kosher again. This, the Machmirim, the Bach and the Magen Avram, don't go so far with their argument as to say that if you put down the schach bekashrus, if you opened up the roof when you originally made the sukkah, and you put down the schach bekashrus, now when you close it, you passel it, and now when you open it, you have a problem of tasa v'lo min ha'asui. That fight they don't go. This would be similar to a case where on Sukkot you took a tarp and you threw a tarp over the sukkah, which renders the sukkah puzzle, and then you took it off. And that's kosher. That's not a problem of tasa v'lo min ha'asui. Now, the Chavetz Chaim does not give a svara over here. He doesn't give us a svara. What's the difference between the two cases? According to the Bach and the Magen Avram, if you can't put the schach up while the roof is closed, because then when you open the roof it's tasa v'lo min ha'asui, how come you could passel it on Yom Tov by closing the roof and then open it, and then it's not tasa v'lo min ha'asui? So a svara he doesn't give us. However, he does compare it to this case of Peres Alei Asadin. Peres Alei Asadin we know is kosher. How do we know Peres Alei Asadin is kosher? So for those of us who are learning Daf Yomi, if you learned Daf Yud Amud Beis, there was a story, I think his name is Minyamin, if I'm not mistaken. Minyamin Eved Ravashi. Minyamin, the Eved of Ravashi, where what he did was he took a garment and he threw a garment up on top of the schach so that it should dry. He had a wet garment, he threw it on top of the schach to spread it out so that it should dry. Ravashi told him, take it off, because if you don't take it off, people are going to think that it's kosher as schach. So go ahead and take it off so people should realize that you can't use it as schach. Now, they bring down from that Gemara, you see that there's no problem of tasa v'lo min ha'asui. If there was a problem of tasa v'lo min ha'asui, what does it help to take it off now? You still have a puzzle of sukkah. It's tasa v'lo min ha'asui. You should have to be menanea all the schach. And he didn't say that now you have to be menanea all the schach. So you see that Peres Alei Asadin does not create a problem of tasa v'lo min ha'asui when you remove it. So that's the raya that this halacha is true from Daf Yud Amud Beis in Sukkah. As far as the svara over here seems to be that the requirement of Chag HaSukkos Tase, the requirement that the sukkah has to be made kosher, and it can't be that it's puzzle and then it's rendered kosher externally. That's only a requirement when you first make the sukkah. When you first make the sukkah and you put the schach up, it has to be put up bekashrus. So over here, even according to the Bach and the Magen Avram, you opened up the roof, you put the schach down bekashrus. You are already mekayim Chag HaSukkos Tase. Even if you close the roof now and you reopen it, there's no problem of tasa v'lo min ha'asui. Now, that was the first problem that we have to tackle with this case of opening and closing this roof on Yom Tov. But then there's another problem. And that problem is binyan and stiras oihel. We know that there's an Isser on Shabbos and on Yom Tov. You're not allowed to make an oihel. You're not allowed to make a shelter. You're not allowed to make a tent. You're not allowed to cover over an area. Over here, in this case, when you're going ahead and you're closing a roof, that l'chayra should be binyan oil. And then when you open up the roof, that should be stiras oil. So why don't we have a problem here of binyan and stiras oil? And if we continue in the words of the Ramah on the top of Pei Vav Amud Beis, Va'afilu b'yom tov shari l'sagran u'lepaschan, you're allowed to close and open this opening and closing roof on Yom Tov. Im yesh lehem tzirim, if it has hinges of some type. In other words, if it's affixed to the binyan, if it's affixed to the structure, and it's built in such a way that it's made to open and close, then you're allowed to open and close it on Yom Tov. Im yesh lehem tzirim, if it has hinges shesoger u'pesach behen, that it closes and opens with, then you're allowed to do it even on Yom Tov. Ve'ein bazeh loy mishum stira ubinyan oil b'Yom Tov. You don't have a problem of stiras and binyan oil. Ve'loy mishum tasa ve'loy min ha'asui, and you do not have a problem of tasa ve'loy min ha'asui. So the problem of tasa ve'loy min ha'asui, that we already discussed. Now we have to discuss the problem of binyan and stiras oil. So, what is the Ramah telling me here? The Ramah is telling me that in order for there to be no problem of binyan and stiras oil, it has to be that there are hinges. It has to be that it's constructed in such a way that it's made to open and close. Now, the Isser Daraisa of binyan stiras oil is making an oil that's shel kayama. It has to be something that's made to last. Making an oil aroi, making a temporary shelter, that would only be an Isser D'Rabbanan. That's the first thing you need to know. The next thing you have to know is that if it has tzirim, if it's something which is made to open and close, then you don't even have an Isser D'Rabbanan. When you have something which is made to open and close, that's like a doorway. When you have a door affixed to a building, we don't say that opening the door is an act of stira, is an act of demolishing. You just demolished a wall, right? When the door's closed, you have a solid wall. Nobody could walk in and out. When you open up the door, you're doing demolition. You now have a 36-inch by 6.5 foot tall opening. So that's demolition. And then when you close the door, it's binyan. You built the wall. No, we don't say that. It's meant to open and close. That's the function of the door. We don't look at that as binyan and stira. So too, when it comes to fashioning an oil, to fashioning a shelter, if it has tzirim, if it has hinges, then we don't look at it as binyan and stiras oil. But if it doesn't have hinges, then you could have a d'Rabbanan dika problem. Now let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah is cut l'chaf. Says the Mishnah Berurah tzirim. If it has hinges, you're okay. To have it kipesach. Once it has hinges, it's comparable to a door. Ube'ein lahem tzir. But if it does not have hinges, shari al yedei akum. Then it would be mutter to ask a non-Jew to open and close this roof. Now, what do we see from that phrase of the Chavetz Chaim? What we see is that if it does not have hinges, it would be an Isser D'Rabbanan. Now this is the key to the way I'm learning Pshat in this Mishnah Berurah, and I have a funny feeling that there are those who have learned wrong Pshat in this Mishnah Berurah. It's very tempting to look at this Ramah and look at this Mishnah Berurah and think that what the Ramah is discussing is simply a question of binyan and stira, building and demolishing, as opposed to binyan and stiras oihel. And I'll tell you what I mean. We just saw from the Chavetz Chaim that the Chavetz Chaim tells you like this. The Ramah says, if it has hinges, you're allowed to do it. If it doesn't have hinges, then you're allowed to do it al yedei akum, which means that without hinges, it's an Isser D'Rabbanan. What Isser D'Rabbanan are we speaking about here? Well, what's the case? Let's say I have this shed-like structure, and we said that it has a roof that's made to open and close. So the case of hinges, I understand very simply. The case of hinges is, you have a hinged roof. There are hinges here at the bottom, and it could swing on the hinges, it could open and close. That's mutter. It's not even an Isser D'Rabbanan, because it's like a Pesach. If there are no hinges, it's an Isser D'Rabbanan. So what's the case of no hinges? Let's say you have this structure and you just want to take 4x8 sheets of plywood and you just want to throw 4x8 sheets of plywood on top of the structure. Is that an Issa D'Rabbanan? Is it an Issa D'Rabbanan to create an oil when it's an oil aroi and it's not even attached to the structure? That's not even an Issa D'Rabbanan. To just throw a piece of plywood down on top and then take it off wouldn't even be an Issa D'Rabbanan. So that's clearly not what the Mishnah Berurah is talking about. So I believe what the Mishnah Berurah is talking about over here is a case as follows. Let's say we're talking about a case where the structure, it's not a shed with a flat roof. Let's say it's a sukkah with a flat roof of bamboo poles. But then you have beams that create a gabled roof. So if the roof is hinged so that you can open it and close it, then the Ramah says that's completely mutter. That's not even an Issa D'Rabbanan. But if it's not hinged, if you're going to take sheets of plywood and you're going to put them down on top of the beams, now you have an Issa D'Rabbanan. Why do you have an Issa D'Rabbanan? Because now there's open space between the sheets of plywood and the schach beneath. If you have an opening of at least a tefach, if you have Pesach tefach, now you have an oil D'Rabbanan problem. In my first case, where you had a sukkah with bamboo on top, and you're throwing the sheets of plywood directly down on top of the bamboo, in that case there's no Pesach tefach. There isn't at least a tefach of space between the sheets of plywood and the bamboo. So you're not making an oil. You're not being mahil over anything. And therefore, in that case, there wouldn't even be an Issa D'Rabbanan. So the Isser that he's talking about is where you're putting the sheets of plywood down over an open space. Then you're being mahil on a space of at least a tefach high. Now you have an Issa D'Rabbanan of creating an oil aroi with this Pesach tefach. And that's why if there are no tzirim, now since it's not made to open and close, you have an Issa D'Rabbanan, and that's only mutter al yedei akum. Continues the Chavetz Chaim here, and he says, "Ve'im haya kol hashana kvuin b'masmerim shepsichasan aser min HaTorah." How about if the sheets of plywood are affixed to the beams with nails? Now to remove that, to open that, is now an Issa D'Oraisa. Now you're doing stira, mamish stiras oil. You're breaking it. You're doing demolition. V'shachach lepaschan, and you forgot to open the roof at Knisas Yom Tov, and now you realize you got a problem. Your sukkah is closed in a way where it would be an Issa D'Oraisa to open it. Im shari lepaschan al yedei akum be'en loy sukkah acheres belel Yom Tov Rishon. Now, if you're stuck and it's the night of Yom Tov Rishon when sitting in the sukkah is a mitzvah say D'Oraisa, and on the other hand, taking the roof off is an Issa D'Oraisa, and you want to do it, but you have no other sukkah to eat in, so you want to do it al yedei akum. You want to ask a non-Jew to do it, so you want to do amira la'akum on a D'Oraisa, mishum shvus b'makom mitzvah, and the way you want to be matir it is, you want to say it's a shvus, it's an Issa D'Rabbanan b'makom mitzvah, v'chein mutter loyma l'nachri sheyisachik lo'isukkah b'yom tov rishon be'en la'acheres. Or you want to ask a non-Jew to build you a sukkah on Yom Tov. You want it to put up the schach on Yom Tov. That's also a potential Issa D'Oraisa of binyan oil. Mistapik ha-pri megadim. Over there, the pri megadim has a suffix whether or not you're allowed to do this because of a shvus b'makom mitzvah. V'siyam, and he concludes, lahorais heter chalilali. He says chalila, he can't be moir heter. He can't say straight out that it's mutter. V'tzarech iyun b'chol zeh. He says it's a great tzarech iyun ad kan l'shoinai v'ayin b'bikur yakum ha'shekasa b'zeh. However, if this problem comes up on Ben Hashmashas, so it's a little bit after Shkia, and you realize, I didn't take the roof off of the sukkah, and the roof is fixed with nails, you got a potential Issa D'Oraisa over here, but I want to ask a non-Jew to do it, so it would only be an Issa D'Rabbanan. It would seem that certainly should be allowable, Amir La'akum, in a Makam, in a Shvus B'Makam Mitzvah during Ben Hashmashas. Okay, now continues the Ramah. Rak, however, in this case of the sukkah with the roof that opens and closes, Yizaher, you have to be very careful. Shalo yeshev tachtein kishein skurin. Certainly you should not use the sukkah while the openable roof is in the closed position. Sha'az sukkah psula. Because, again, while the roof is in the closed position, the sukkah certainly is psul. So you cannot use the sukkah while the sukkah is closed. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Chafalev Shalo Yeshev Teviki Yeshev B'Sukkah Shenivneis Teichabayis. When the roof is in the closed position, then this sukkah is like a sukkah b'Teichabayis, and certainly it's psul. Says the Chavetz Chaim, V'tzarich Li Zaher, and when you have a sukkah like this that has the gabled roof, the slanted roof that can open and close, says the Chavetz Chaim, you have to take care Sheyiu Agagois Niftachim Heitev, that when you open the slanted roof, it has to be opened all the way, fully in the vertical position. Lamoid begoiva b'shave im adafanois. It has to be in an equal vertical line. The vertical axis should be the same as the walls of the sukkah. V'lo yiu mutin k'tzas al schach. It shouldn't be leaning over a little bit so that it's forming an overhang over the schach. Okay, if the sukkah is here and the walls of the sukkah are down here, but your closable roof is a little bit in the closed position, right? So then it's actually causing an overhang over part of the interior of the sukkah. Shem yu mutin k'tzas, because if they are somewhat closed, av shelo yeh shir gadol shetipasel sukkah machmazeh, even though it's not going to be closed so that it causes a 4 amma area on the side of the sukkah that's covered, which would passel the whole sukkah. So what the Chavetz Chaim is saying is like this: if you have a sukkah, here's your sukkah, right? Let's do it like here. Here's the vertical wall. Here's the vertical wall of your sukkah, and here's the schach, right? And here you have your closable roof. If it would be closed to the extent where it's causing a 4 amma area between the wall of the sukkah and the overhang of the closable roof, that would passel the entire sukkah, because now the schach is positioned 4 ammas away from the walls. That would passel your entire sukkah. But, says the Chavetz Chaim, even if it's not 4 ammas, if it's only a little bit, so it's only passeling a little bit of the sukkah over here, but now you're going to have to make sure that nobody sits over here. If they sit over there, they're sitting in a passel of sukkah. Okay, continues the Chavetz Chaim. Kasav Pri Begadim B'Sayf Siman Tafresh Mem Daled. Pri Begadim writes in Siman Tafresh Mem Daled, Mezuzah b'sukkah pater. You should know that the sukkah is pater from a mezuzah. Umashma, and the implication of the Pri Begadim is that even cheder shall kol hashana shedar by tamid. Even, let's say, you have one of these houses where your dining room is going to become your sukkah. You use this dining room all year round. So certainly all year round you have a sukkah on the door to a mezuzah on the door to the dining room. Now on sukkahs you remove the removable roof of the dining room and you put up your schach, and now it's your sukkah. Even in that case, says the Pri Begadim, I mean, at least the implication of the Pri Begadim is afilu haki b'sukkahs p'tura. On sukkahs that dining room becomes pater from mezuzah. Why? The b'shiva yamim lav keva mikri, because for those 7 days it's not called a diras kva. And a diras aroi is not chayiv in mezuzah. So for those 7 days of sukkahs, that dining room is going to be pater in mezuzah. So first we have the simple halacha. The Chavetz Chaim over here goes mikal ala kaved. He goes from the easier case to the more complex case. The first rule is you go build a sukkah on your patio in your backyard. The sukkah is pater from mezuzah because it's a diras aroi. The second case, you have a dining room that you use all year round, so it has a mezuzah all year round. On sukkahs, you remove the roof. Says the Chavetz Chaim, it's mashma from the Pri Begadim, that now the dining room is pater from mezuzah for the days of sukkahs, because for the days of sukkahs it becomes a diras harai. Now, next case. Let's say you build your sukkah, and your sukkah is attached to the house. So you have a dining room on your sukkah, and off the dining room you have patio doors going to a deck. And on the deck you go ahead and you build a sukkah. We just said that the sukkah is pater from mezuzah. But in this case, says the Chavetz Chaim, im hoilech mechedroi l'sukkah, if you are going out from the dining room to the sukkah, Pesach HaSukkah tzarich mezuzah mishum chedroi. So then certainly you have to have a mezuzah on the door that goes from the dining room to the deck. All year round you need a mezuzah going from the dining room to the deck because you need a mezuzah because of the dining room. Right? In this case, the dining room is your dining room all year round, and you have a mezuzah because you go from the deck to the dining room and from the dining room to the deck. Now on Sukkot also, even though the Sukkah is not chayiv in mezuzah, but you're going from the Sukkah into the dining room, and the dining room is chayiv in mezuzah. So in that case, don't think that on Sukkot you could pull the mezuzah off the deck door. No, you can't. Because even though the sukkah doesn't require a mezuzah, but the dining room does require a mezuzah. So in that case, you need a mezuzah. Next case. If you go from your sukkah to a room, this case over here is like this. Let's say you have a front door to the house, and you walk into the house, you walk into one room. And then at the back of that room is a door that no, the other way. 1 second. Okay, the other way. Let's say you have a situation where you go from the Rishus Harabim into the Sukkah. So you have, most people, let's say nowadays, have the sukkah in the backyard. You have the sukkah on the front of your house. You built onto the front door of your house, you built a sukkah. So now, when you come home from shul, what do you walk into? You walk into the sukkah. Now, we just said that a sukkah doesn't need a mezuzah, because a mezuzah is a dir sarai. And in this case, you don't have the problem with the previous case. In the previous case, you have to have a mezuzah on the door of the deck, because even though the sukkah doesn't need a mezuzah, but the dining room needs the mezuzah. But now we don't have that problem. Now the door to the sukkah is out to Rishus Harabim. So maybe now you'll say, okay, I built on a sukkah onto the front door of my house. Now I don't need a mezuzah on the sukkah. Why do I need a mezuzah on the sukkah? I learned that halacha sukkah doesn't need a mezuzah. If there's a doorway going from the sukkah into the house, right? If the sukkah is built onto the front door of the house, so I'll have a mezuzah on the front door of the house. So when you go from the street into the sukkah, no mezuzah. When you go from the sukkah into the house, you'll have a mezuzah. Sounds very reasonable. Says the Chavetz Chaim, no. That's this case here. If you're going from the sukkah into the room, into the house, in such a situation where the opening from the Rishus Harabim is into the sukkah, yesh loymar, then you could say shechayev hu b'mezuzah b'pesach b'sukkah hapasuach l'Rishus Harabim v'chadoyma. Then you need a mezuzah on the doorway that goes from the sukkah to the Rishus Harabim, from the Rishus Harabim to the sukkah. Why? The heavy kibei shar, because now the sukkah becomes a gatehouse that serves the house. The halach in Hilchas Mezuzah is, if you have a house, and in front of the house you build a beis shar, you build an entranceway, you build an entrance foyer, what they would call a beis shar, a gatehouse, that beis shar needs a mezuzah, because it serves the house. So to over here, you built a sukkah onto the front door of the house. Now you're right that al sukkah it doesn't need a mezuzah, but it needs a mezuzah because the sukkah is a beis shar to the house, and in that case it would need a mezuzah. Okay, I thought we would get to start Siman Tov Reish Chav Zayin. Wasn't to be, but I'm happy. I think this was much clearer, even the beginning of this year. I'm happy I took the extra time. Me'ez Hashem, next time we'll continue with Siman Tov Reish Chav Zayin. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The schus of limud HaTorah should be megan on Gans Klal Yisrael. The Rabbanan should send Yeshua's refuahs and parnasa to all those in need, and we should be zeicher to see the Bias Kol Tzedek b'mehera v'yameinu. Amen. Be well.